This is an introductory video for the course on the physiology that might be involved in spiritual receptivity. So, as you know, we've sort of grown up over millions of years from the protoplasmic base. The mind adjutants have worked with us to get us up to that state of wisdom. So from this perspective, this wisdom perspective, we're going to try and look for those coherences between the physical and the spiritual to see how could we be influenced by things spiritual. As you can see from this tree, there's lots of possibilities. And we're going to look at some of the specifics of the way spiritual energies, which are very different from material energies, might possibly influence the mechanical material world. In this course, we're going to look for ways using physics and physiology to explain how the very different spiritual energies might physically interact. We'll look for possible coherences in the electromechanical, electrochemical, the brain, the body, the mid-mind, the soul. We'll even look to see if there's a physical component of the soul. We'll look at the mindal, emotional overcontrol of these physiologies, the feedback loop between the physical, emotional, and spiritual influences. And we'll look for ways to improve our ability to detect, enhance, improve the receptivity, and maybe even improve our capacity for those spiritual influences. Now, I'm not going to suggest that this is a reductionist mentality where we can reduce our self-consciousness or God consciousness to the motions of matter. I am going to suggest that there are ways that the spiritual energies can influence our matter and look at mind as the interpreter. So we're going to look at things in the body, in the brain, in the mind, which is more the overview of the brain, and the mid-mind, or the soul, recognizing that it's really in the brain, in the mind, that we can interpret these things. Spirit forces are real, just like material forces we know to be real to us. This radiometer can feel those photons and goes winging around. Can we feel the spiritual energy as it impinges on our mind? Can we spin our thoughts in receptive mode to that incoming energy? We'll investigate, find out. We're going to do that investigation in these 32 rather deep areas of investigation. We're going to look to each of these for coherences, for connectedness. We're going to look at the brain-mind consciousness, just exactly what is consciousness? What are the types of consciousness? There's currently a whole bunch of theories on exactly what consciousness is, but what is it from a Urantia book perspective? We'll look at the top theories of consciousness and see which ones really apply to our way of seeing things. What about intercellular consciousness? How does one cell know what the next cell is thinking, or how do they communicate cell to cell? We'll look at some of that type of consciousness, body consciousness. We'll look at epigenetics. the DNA modifications, which are directly influenced by the way you think and by the way you act and how your body responds to those things. We'll look at mechanisms to effectively improve our epigenetic model, or the way DNA is folded. We'll look at neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are in the nerves, and they determine how you react. Dopamine, serotonin, things like that determine how you react to thoughts and how to control those, the way you react. We'll look at basic homeostasis, the calmness that you influence on a day-to-day basis, and how that influences the way you think. We'll look at brain waves. There's multiple ways of separating or viewing brain waves to see what's exactly happening in those different areas and what kind of thoughts control what kind of brain waves. We'll look at overall picturizations of those thoughts and how those pictures are formed. We'll look at these cute little things called ARCs and SAMs, activity-regulated cytoskeletons and synaptic adhesion molecules. They really control the interconnectedness of our neurons and our thought patterning. And how did that change with the maturing brain? What's different about a child's brain versus a teenage brain versus an older adult brain? Physiological differences, emotional differences, reaction differences. What makes a thought change or change into a thought adjuster or change into a thought controller, for that matter? One of the interesting things we'll look at are these microtubules that are in all the cells in your body that have our DNA. They're kind of a structural integrity of each of the cell, and they are the primary mechanism for communicating to the next cell. And they buy us time between sensory input and the communication to the next cell. When these microtubules are in the brain, they're called neurotubules, and they are very much involved in our thoughts and how our thoughts are patterned and collected and organized. We'll look at the overall electromagnetic continuum and see where you might think that spirit energies and Morontia energies and material energies interact. We'll look at some of the physiologic continuum. Where is the emotional range that we play in? We'll look at some magnetic resonances for single and quantum, multiple quantum coherences in the electromagnetic, or in the specifically magnetic range in the brain. We'll look for different ways of sensing time. Personality is uniquely conscious of time. We are uniquely conscious of time. How might those time consciousnesses overlap? We'll look at multiple mechanisms of physiological clocks and how those clocks might interact, how we might get different senses from circadian to microsecond coordinations. We'll look for a thought feedback loop, things that you think that change your physiology. What about a near-death experience? How does that change your physiology? How does that change your experiences? And we'll look at general emotional processes and emotional self-mastery. How can we master our emotional response to improve our spiritual receptivity? The difference between normal sentience and God consciousness. How does that play out? What if we have the top-down perspective versus our bottom-up perspective? How do those two perspectives improve our sense of spiritual receptivity? What about the physiology of the soul? Is there a physiological component that might be the soul for transmission to mansion world, to start you off on a Morontia body to behave, think, act just the way you're left off down here? What about soul fusion? We'll do some thinking about how soul could possibly fuse, how the two energies, the material energies and spiritual energies, could possibly fuse. And lastly, we'll look at some of the philosophy of this physiology of spiritual influences. We'll kind of wrap it up with an overall philosophy much like the Urantia book's philosophy in an overview perspective. The course is going to be primarily a discussion or exploration kind of course. And there won't be any right, wrong, multiple choice question and answer kind of exams. It will be very much a give and take exchange there, and we may go and research deeper into some specific areas, or there may be some areas we want to do little sociological experiments with. I don't know. Anyway, the only way we're going to get through this course, I think, is to take a guidance from our master, who was able to mobilize all the powers of his mind and soul and body on the task immediately at hand. He could concentrate his deep thinking mind on the one problem, which in this case is our spiritual receptivity, and with untiring patience and serenely, calmly pursuing it to its conclusion. So I hope you will join me in this exploration, probably a 6-week course, as we look for ways we might improve our physiological receptivity to spiritual influences. Thanks. Take care.